able to enter. And finally, we will close this journey, very, very important space, talking about the redefine milk donation in the perinatal grief from a perspective of autonomy, science, rights, with very important doctors, Dr. Professor Dr. Nicholas Templeton, Dr. Jean Agripgio, Dr. Ángela María Muñoz Carrillo, and Señor Valentina Jurades Ramírez.
Tenemos la coordinación prácticamente de la plana mayor de Alcepneo. Dentro de esos, la doctora Ángela Lombo, nuestra coordinadora y presidenta del evento actual que estamos realizando aquí en la ciudad de Medellín, docente de posgrado y especialización de la Universidad CES, miembro del grupo de investigación de la Fundación Canguro y de la REP Sanar y miembro de la Junta Directiva de Alcepneo. También está la doctora Lidia Giudici, pediatra neonatóloga, directora académica de Alcepneo, directora de carrera de especialización de desarrollo infantil de la Facultad de Medicina de la Universidad de Buenos Aires y autora y revisora de publicaciones sobre desarrollo infantil y seguimiento del recién nacido. Y con ellos estará Alba Castro, nuestra pediatra y neonatóloga, adjunta del Servicio de Neonatología del Hospital Pérez Carreño, profesora del posgrado de pediatría del Hospital Pérez Carreño y docente del posgrado de neonatología Hospital Pérez Carreño, miembro fundadora del CEGNEO e integrante del grupo y comité local organizador de este evento. A ella les doy la bienvenida a este interesante módulo. Bienvenidos a todos.
Si quieres, sigamos acá. Muchas gracias al doctor Richard Vaquero por su introducción a este debate. Bueno, y como todo debate, y aquí en Colombia estamos de debate y debate cada fin de semana porque estamos en elecciones. Pero bueno, este debate tiene otro enfoque. Le damos entonces bienvenida a este debate, Resignificación de la donación de leche en el duelo perinatal, autonomía, ciencia y derechos. Este es un encuentro que nos invita a mirar la donación de leche humana desde una perspectiva profundamente humana, ética y además científica. Por eso la calidad de nuestros participantes.
So, perinatal grief is a huge burden for the families. In this context, the possibility of donating mother's milk can be, for many mothers, a way to redefine experience, have autonomy, and transform grief in a solidarity act that will impact the lives of the newborn babies. Throughout this debate, we will talk about things related to rights, informed decisions, scientific evidence surrounding this process from an empathetic point of view. We would like to thank each and every one of you and all the panel members here today so we can have this very important conversation. Before we start, we would like to do a brief presentation of our panel members. We have psychologists, neonatologists, working with the Mariposa Project, and grief, neonatologist, professor, and also we have a pediatrician, and we also have a mother here with us together who's going to talk about this concept. So, as you can see, we have different points of views, but we also want to know your point of view. We want to ask you some questions. Please raise your hand. There we can see on how we can focus our talk today. So, do you consider that donation can redefine the prenatal grief? Yes? Who can raise your hands if you believe so? Very well. Who don't think so? Okay. Sure? Are you sure? This is a debate, okay? Or depends the support or the follow-up? Because there's also no response. Depend of the support received, follow-up received. And in your institutions, is there a specific protocol to support the mothers who accompany those in grief? No? Raise your hand. I see the response already. Okay, who should lead these programs? The Human Milk Bank? Who thinks the Human Milk Bank? Psychologist? Neonatologist? Or an interdisciplinary team? That's better. Do you think that all the mothers in grief should receive information regarding the possibility of donating breast milk? Okay. What do you consider to be the main challenge in this context? Mental health? Ethical aspects? Lack of protocols? Institutional fear? Or cultural barriers? Very well. This is what we're going to talk about today. And for this, I would like to present Ángela María Muñoz. She is mother of Juan Isaac, who died in 2016. Maria Carolina is her daughter, lawyer of the Javeriana University, magister in Los Angeles University. She is a psychologist candidate and works for Heat Foundation and also a tutor of perinatal grief and enabler of groups for people going under grief, with more than 20 years in experience in legal aspects, political strategies, and leads the creation of humanization program of perinatal grief and in the implementation of the first space for perinatal grief. That's why I'm here. Good afternoon. Okay, let's start this conversation and reflection space, talking about these very important legal aspects, political aspects, and also the challenges that it takes. The approach of lactating in grief, perinatal context I represent. HIC is Juan Isaac Castañeda, where we offer support to the families under grief, and we work together with the human talent in healthcare, helping them to develop protocols, among other things. We also work for the advocacy and the motivations of the public policies in perinatal grief, and we develop sensibilization strategies and the organizations. As mentioned by Dr. Julieta, we were the managers of, we helped this law. So, and this is very proud, because this is the first law in perinatal grief. We are a reference point for Latin America and Central America right now. The magnitude of the perinatal grief in Colombia, we can see it through the figures, the data. According to the statistics of DANI, Statistics Department, in 2025 we had 22,000 deaths in total, adding the perinatal deaths and neonatal deaths, as well as miscarriage, with which we talk about 62 women daily. And according to the healthcare institution, in 2025, the perinatal death was in 13.1 deaths for every 1,000 baby born. And moreover, these figures, it talks about women facing adaptation processes, faced with the reality they did not expect, the death of their children. In the fund, we developed a survey in 2021 to define what was the perception of the healthcare after the grief and during these processes. 57 women answered, and in the questions that we asked them was the women under grief shared that they did not have information on the possibility to produce milk in the hospital. 61% of those women asked. 61%, 81% received pharmacological inhibition, and 62% of those questioned said that if they had the possibility, they would have donated their milk. And out of that universe, only 2% was able to do so. So the perinatal grief is a different grief to all the others, because for that woman that is facing the loss of the baby, with which has still a relationship, represents a sensation of biological failure. Literature and experiences show that there's an impact in the self-esteem of the women. There's a failure in the project of life, and it's framed due to not understanding the family surrounding, the social surrounding. And furthermore, it's a grief that has been silenced in the past and doesn't have any authority, and it's believed that the pain and the grief is directly proportional to the amount of weeks of pregnancy or days of life that the baby had when the baby died. And this is wrong. This is a paradigm that we need to change. Afterwards, we will talk about from the perinatal psychology point of view, because a baby is unique, and it's a baby independently of the amount of weeks. What we're seeing, it's not acknowledged, this relationship. Therefore, it's not acknowledged the loss nor the grief. And we have answers in a way that justify the situation, that generate even more pain. At least that pain was small. Thanks to God, it was now, not in the future. You're young, you can have much more babies, and that you can overcome the situation. What is the silence behind the perinatal grief? We seek not to talk about it because we don't know how to face it, because we don't have the tools, and it's easier to reduce that to only a physical event, to not talk about that baby that was being expected, because it's a fetus, it's not a product. It's one Isaac, it's Laura, that had all the baby's name and everybody waiting for the baby. There's conspiracy of the silence that we generate around grief, and also around the lactating process. To understand this grief supposes for the family and the women to face the loss, acknowledge the loss, and go through each moment of that process, and to be able to redefine it. And for us, I include myself, for us as human talent in healthcare, the challenge is to accompany these people accordingly. In a legal aspect, we have some milestones that have been developed and that will lead us to what's going to be the center of our discussion today. In the framework of the political constitution in Colombia, the women, the pregnant women, are women under special protection of the state, where they have the legal right to equality. In 2019, the Ministry of Social Protection generated a first version of the technical guidelines for the human rights. And we'll talk about breast milk. In August 2023, the law 2310 of open arms, afterwards the law 2361 of 2024, a very interesting law, because a framework was generated for the guidelines that were going to be developed around the public policies in maternal breastfeeding. After that, the resolution 2623 in perinatal grief, and in February 2026, the Ministry of Health opened to a public consultation a bill to be able to strengthen what the law 2361 mentioned. Recently, we had the resolution 812 that regulates the human milk banks. Since 2019 until today, in 2019, when this guideline was defined, it established expressly that the women are considered to be able to donate human milk, though the ones that who have a live baby and that have very good state of nutrition and health immediately generated an exclusion because it didn't say the meaning that the women in grief could not donate. But nowadays, the quality of that live baby generated a prohibition. This prohibition in which we are today, which is urgent, when 2316, which is a milestone for our country, this law, in this law established 6 very important things around women around grief, delegated to the Ministry of Health to have a technical and comprehensive care to the women who have a baby has died, and also said to the Ministry of Health and Education to promote all of the trainings, education of human talent in all the institutions. In third position, said to the Secretary of Health, you need to operate so it can arrive to the territories. Number 4, obligated the health institution to adopt the national guidelines. They are fulfilling that guidelines today, and to adapt what they already had in the national norms. Fifth place, ordering the implementation of plans for prevention and to reduce the perinatal deaths, and established on the 15th of October the National Day regarding perinatal deaths in Colombia. This is a World Day. Now it's a National Day. So I have received a beautiful pin, a blue ribbon with pink, which is a ribbon that symbolizes the perinatal death. What does the empty arms law means? Here we have neonatologists, lawyers, psychologists, professors. Why? Because it's all about rights, the human rights of a woman from her own autonomy to decide whatever she considers she needs, obviously inside the framework of a safety, security, but according to the diagnosis that she has, but always from the criteria of the care focused on the person, the right to information, where the woman who is facing the loss is considered another able to decide on the information shared based on evidence, not on my own beliefs. And the norm says, including everything regarding to lactating under grief. What happened before this law in a study that we did in Los Andes University that supported the empty arms law identified that the women were given no explanation. The law empty arms says that we need to guarantee the existence of an informed consent and to offer the due information. But furthermore, what it says that faced with the mental health, the woman has the right to psychological assistance whenever she needs it, independently of the years or months, of pregnancy. Assistance offered according to what she needs. This is very important. The women is not really forced to do anything. We need to guarantee the right for her to decide. And here, as it happens in the other aspects in lactation, we need to guarantee the women to have psychosocial assistance. The resolution 2623 arrives given by the Ministry of Health. This resolution is our roadmap in perinatal grief as institutions and a system. Through this resolution established regarding lactation, that human talent in healthcare done by this team should be informed. We need to inform to get to know the options in lactation after the perinatal death and offer the different alternatives. It's not enough that I know them, I need to offer them. And it gives some examples. What happens is that among these examples, they don't include donation. So it's open to the different interpretations. It says, furthermore, that the information should be offered during all the time the person is in the hospital and is expected to give the person infographic information and not abandon the woman. And it was okay up till now, but the discussion rises that why Colombia is in the focus of this discussion debate around lactation in perinatal grief. Law 2361 of 2024 established already the obligation to offer donation of milk. Now, in the framework that the ministry had to fulfill the public policy, the ministry said, okay, you need to make feasible the donation after the perinatal grief. But in our governments, what happens? The ministry issued a public policy forbidding expressly donation of milk in perinatal grief via the inclusion criteria that repeats coming from 2019. And number two, explicitly, it says that it will not be included as donors of in those women who have lost their babies.
This is a public policy project, and I want to tell you that we did a wonderful coordination with that. Dr. Angela Nomo was part of it, and also many of us. And we also coordinated the health sector, governors, experts, breastfeeding consultants, the academia, and we were able to compile more than 50 articles, recent articles, evidence regarding breastfeeding in cases of perinatal grieving. We did a work to the minister suggesting, and it was very interesting because of the mediatic movement, they decided to open up a technical discussion group, and I wanted to show you what were the arguments that the minister established, and because it also helps us to see the other side. Julieta was saying, okay, who is in favor and who is against when we are innovating, when we are changing to be able to build other perspectives. We needed to take into account all the positions. The minister was said that scientific evidence was not conclusive because most of it was qualitative. They were also telling us that voluntary and altruistic donation generated a psychological pressure to the woman. And what was also established that it was a very sensitive issue, a very complex issue that could generate a second grief or mourning process for that woman. And there was also the risk of quality on the nutritional properties of the milk. I know that we're going to talk about because there's evidence about this topic. And therefore we can generate high funding costing from the social and health insurance that and therefore if there were also the coordination of the care pathways, and that there was not an adequate funding for the psychosocial when there was a prenatal grief. And that's why they can say that this also required an installed capability in the banks. So this thing that you may say who is responsible, because the minister said no, because all the banks cannot be the ones responsible for. In this technical group where we had a lot of people, very high pressure, there was a very interesting debate, and And that concludes with an answer from the ministry. I think it was just 25 people in favor, one against, with new responses of the minister that was favorable. When I say that once we go over the evidence and then all the contributions, all the attendees to the technical group did, and therefore they created the exclusion criteria for the donations. Right now, we have not issued the resolution, and we still have the lining for 2019. And what we can see, it's the several breast milk banks have been implementing this, and that's why this means a huge challenge for Colombia, because the Kennedy Breast Milk Bank, the one in Hospital Universitario del Valle here in Medellin, we also had milk with very good outcomes. And therefore this would have meant a setback. And therefore I want to close this part of the presentation talking about the challenges that we have, and that's why we are going to talk about the main thing is that the norm is just a picture, because from the norm to the real practice and to healthcare, that we are able to acknowledge that perinatal grief is a public health issue. It's not just something for the psychologist and the psychiatrist. And therefore, when we talk about women should be accompanied by information to ensure autonomy and the right to mental health, because in practice it's not happening, because in practice human talent that is responsible for maternal parental health, it's not certified in perinatal grief. Therefore, I would like to ask you to raise your hands. How many of you have taken trainings in perinatal grief or mourning? Okay, less than half, less than half. This is just an invitation, and I think that we have a huge responsibility in what we do. And the second thing is to overcome that paternalistic approach where we pathologize the woman. We see her unable to decide because she is in mourning. And therefore, to overcome this, it means to provide the alternatives, to ensure the alternative that she has taken. And therefore, to be able to avoid, because I don't talk, and that she is the one that decides, ensuring her sexual and reproductive autonomy and a psychosocial accompanying, because of course here we needed to have a psychosocial and where besides we include all the healthcare. And the responsibility, it's not from the banks, it's not from the institutions, it's from all of us, because this is a public health issue, because we're all going to have a role to be able to ensure, and the women have the rights. I want to say the right to say, if she doesn't want to, she decides not to, but if she wants to, we wanted to ensure it, because the system, it's a fragmented. I want to close up with two sentences. One system that takes care and that accompanies both life and death, that acknowledges and ensures the autonomy of a mother, and the system that validates the dignity and ensures, and it's a system that takes care of us. And once that was the International Donation Day of, and this was part of a this is part of a publication that we made. This as a mourning mother can save a life, and because a donation of a breast milk, it's a legacy that allows the resignification, and and therefore this possibility about giving a new meaning. I want to give the word to the creator of Mamara, the content creator, and also a grieving breastfeeder. Valentina Amara transformed the way she lived maternity and grief. After her death, she donated the breast and milk during 11 months, and turning love into an action of care, and also to other babies and families. And she has collaborated with two breast milk banks, and therefore she has become an international reference. And from her personal experience, she accompanies, she visibilizes, and she gives words to silence the realities, creating a sensibility and acknowledgement and humanity around prenatal death, and also maternity that is affected by death. We're going to give the floor to Valentina.
Hola, buenas tardes. Muchas gracias por esa introducción. Ángela, también muchísimas gracias por abrirme el camino, por abrirme el paso. En serio que ella es una persona que me ha guiado mucho en el proceso, me ha acompañado en todo este duelo y en toda esta etapa. Entonces, qué rico estar hoy aquí. Les cuento, yo soy Valentina Jurado, soy la mamá de Amara, soy creadora de contenido y Amara vino a mi vida y llegó al mundo para ayudar a muchísimas personas. La lactancia en mí fue una ayuda increíble y no empezó, digamos, siendo como algo planeado y la donación de leche no empezó siendo planeada, sino que pasó de una manera muy mágica, sin yo ni siquiera pues como saberlo. Voy a interrumpir un momentico para preguntarles si están viendo la presentación. Bueno, aquí entonces les voy a hacer como un breve story time de lo que pasó con Amara. Amara nació el 23 de octubre de 2024. Yo tuve un embarazo, pues entre comillas, normal. Lo único que me diagnosticaron fue arteria umbilical única. En el momento en el que Amara nace, más o menos como a las 7 horas, ven que, digamos, estaba saturando bajito, la ingresan a la unidad de cuidados intensivos neonatales y al otro día, pues tras una serie de exámenes, le diagnostican una cardiopatía congénita llamada transposición de grandes vasos y arterias. Por ese motivo, digamos, yo me tuve que desplazar con ella a la
And
Fundación
therefore,
Valle de
I
Lili
went to
en
Valle de
Cali.
Lili in Cali. We went with her to Valle de Lili in
porque pues
Cali
no sabíamos
because
específicamente
there
qué
was
indicaba, no
and there
sabíamos
was no
como
specialist. We didn't have the
óptimamente qué
optimal to
método
be able
tratamiento.
to treat,
Llegamos entonces
and
nosotros
that's
a la
why we
fundación,
arrived to
allá
the
llegamos,
foundation and to Fundación Valle de Lili. We got
enseguida
there,
pues estaba mi
and
mamá bien
she was
y la
okay.
lactancia
I
fue
initiated
un
the
poquito difícil con ella
breastfeeding was a
porque
bit hard
como pues
because
estamos
I was
desde
producing
los
too
primeros
much
meses
milk,
de
and then
embarazo a
therefore
los 4 años
a
básicamente
newborn
damos
doesn't
leche
drink
para
as
ella.
much. That's why there was
Llegamos
a breast milk for her. It was like in my house, we transported in a
especiales
special
y pues
fridges, and after that, the doctors decided to they
pues
approved that
ingresarla
Amara
y
was would
pudieron hacerle
that she
la
would go
cardioterapia
and we could correct the
cuando estuvo
cardiopathy.
en
This happened after she
cirugía,
went into
además
surgery and
tuvimos que hacerle
she
una
had
cirugía
hypertension,
cardiometabólica
and
y 2 semanas
two
después
weeks
pues
later,
desafortunadamente
after being in
Amara
Yarmouth,
falleció por un paro cardíaco.
Tamara failed because of a
Y en
multi-organic
ese
failure.
proceso
Back
yo
then, I
tuve
kept
leche
on
para mi
producing
Amara,
milk because for me,
como un acto de fe, como
breastfeeding was
pues
like an
cuando
act of
tenía
faith to
mucho
being with her
y
with
estaba
the
en cesárea, que
ICU
eso
and they're
era
on.
como
This above all was like,
la
okay,
cesárea
when
pues
she
lo
wakes up, I'm
esperado
going
y
to
bueno,
be,
era
and
como
I'm going
la
to be
decisión
able
como
to
de la
give her
cesárea. Pero
the
luego
milk. But in
pues
those
con
2 weeks
toda
that she was
esta
intubated,
trauma
I had
pues
already
de
donated what
leche
I had
pues
already
funcionó.
done
Entonces
to
al final de
freezers,
todo
and
esto
that's why
la
it was
cesárea
not
pues no
enough. And I was
fue
going to
más
say I'm not
grave,
going to be able to
solamente
do it more.
fue
We had
la leche. Y
and
en el momento en el que ella fallece, como yo me
and
tranquilicé, yo averigüé y tú puedes, digamos, donar la leche materna en el
I
hospital
decided to
universitario de Duelo,
donate
en
the
Cali.
breast
Como
milk.
les dije, como yo soy de otra ciudad, pues yo fui a la ciudad, hice pues como todo el ritual de despedida que pues le hacemos
And
normalmente a las
therefore
personas y volví a Cali para
and I
dar
went back
la
to
lechita
Cali
materna que ellos me almacenan en los bancos de leche.
in
Y
the
quiero pues
breast.
darte
I'm
el
sorry, but
testimonio.
we can't hear what she's saying.
Y aquí yo les voy mostrando más o menos, digamos, las foticos de
I want
que
to
mi
show
mamá
you
Amara
the
comenzó
pictures of.
Ese era el calostro que yo producía, que era demasiado. Yo llenaba 3, 4, 5 teteros de calostro al día. Me extraía en la unidad de cuidados intensivos. Ahí están pues como las fotos más o menos de la recapitulación y los recuerdos. Ese, digamos, era un congelador. Así almacenaba la leche materna, la almacené pues los primeros días. Entonces aquí les estaba contando que la enfermera de turno me dijo, mamá, yo averigüé, hay un banco de leche en el HV, allá puedo donar la leche. Ese fue como el primer contacto que yo tuve con el HV. Ellos pues me hicieron una serie de preguntas, me hicieron una serie de cuestionarios, empecé, digamos, a dar todo el tema de la historia clínica, los exámenes que tenía que dar de sangre y todos esos exámenes que pues pueden prevenir para que no se dé una transmisión, digamos, de algún tipo de infección o de enfermedad, pues mediante la leche materna. En ese momento yo doné los primeros 3 bancos de leche que tenía llenos Y después de ahí, pues en mi sentir, yo seguía produciendo demasiada leche. Amara falleció a los 37 días, entonces pues obviamente estaba en un pico de leche que las mamás posparto conocemos y yo les dije, yo quiero seguir donando leche. A la final yo estoy produciendo pues algo que los bebés necesitan. Ellos me explicaban todo el tema de los bebés a los que se les iba a administrar la leche materna, que duros, bebés con mamás positivas para VIH, bebés, digamos, con algún tipo de enfermedades congénitas. Y pues a mí eso me llenó el alma saber que yo podía, en medio del dolor, seguir ayudando a los bebés y pues también
Y ahí decidí seguir donando
And
leche
that's why I
materna.
decided to keep on donating
Pero Leche
the milk, the breast milk. I did never think that this was
¿qué pasara?
different.
2 meses y medio después
And
hubo
therefore
especiales, hubo
I had
como transitando, ¿cierto?
I
Un,
wanted
un vortex
and
paradoxico
therefore
de
I
vida.
wanted to
Y
see what
ahí,
was
pues,
going to
el
happen.
mundo conoció la
And
historia
we
de
can
Mara,
say
el
that the
mundo
world understand listens
conoce
to the story
quién
of
es esta
Amara,
mujer
that
que era Mara, que es
and this is
Valentina.
Amara, this is
Empezamos a
Valentina,
hacer
and
content
we
sobre
started to do
lactancia,
content
lactancia.
regarding
Empezamos todo el
breastfeeding,
proceso
and it was
porque
beautiful.
pues las mujeres de las
And
ciudades pues no
therefore,
eran muy
because
conocidas y
breast
nuestra
milking
historia
during
era
morning was
muy
not as well
única.
known, and their history
Entonces
was
como
going
en
to
el
be
viaje
unique in
en ese
Colombia and the
mundo,
world.
ahí digamos también conocí
And
a Ángela
therefore, I also met
y
Angela.
empecé este
And
tema
I
de
answered
donando
this
leche,
about
seguir
grief,
dando leche
breastfeeding during the
materna.
grief. I kept on donating.
Algunos
And
días
some days,
también acudí
I
a hacer
also
una
went,
sesión
I was in
y
Medellin,
estaba yo
and
como pensando,
therefore,
bueno, pues yo tengo
and
leche,
I
no quiero
have milk and
botarla.
I don't want to throw
Entonces
it
fui a un
away. And that's why
laboratorio
I
pues
went
veterinario
to
en
the,
Medellín, recibí el
and
certificado,
they
el
welcomed
veterinario
me,
cita a
and
los
they
pacientes,
received the milk,
ellos
and we initiating
verificaron
that
pues mi
this
bebé
process,
tuvo
and
pues
with postcards,
pues muchas
and
entidades, digamos,
and with many
investigando la historia
institutions
de
trying
leche
to make
y al
visible the
final
story of
duré más
Amara
o
the milk, and
menos 11 meses donando leche
donating
materna,
maternal milk,
ayudando pues
and
como a erradicar
especially
el
for the
VIH
breast
porque
milk
pues
banks
yo tuve
that were the
el
HIV,
HIV
and also the
un tiempo y decidí
and
volver a
therefore
donar.
and
Bueno, algo que ha sido, digamos, también muy
and
trascendente en mi
therefore
proceso fue que
it's something that
ambos
happened
familiares
in my
me dieron la
process,
oportunidad
and
de
no one
ofrecerme
gave me the
sangre.
possibility of the
Desde el
donation of
principio
breast milk.
quise, digamos,
I from
decidir
the
por el mismo
beginning
cuerpo y
I
sacar la
wanted
leche de
to
manera
do
autónoma.
these things
Obviamente,
autonomy,
ginecólogos
and
no me
therefore
habían recetado esa
gynecologists in my
enfermedad
own
y pues
family,
esta
and
medicación es para
therefore
el bebé.
do
Pero
use this
yo,
medication
pues
to
yo tengo
dry
mis
the milk,
creencias como
and
persona que
as a
yo
personal
sé que mi
beliefs,
cuerpo es
and
autónomo y
therefore
independiente y que mi cuerpo mismo
and
pues
that my
sabe
body
o
it
decide
chooses
cuándo va a ser la mejor pues
when to
la
do
forma,
it,
la manera y el
and
momento
therefore the
de
moment.
erradicar la lactancia. Cuando a mí me
And
diagnosticaron
when
pues
they
entonces
give
que
me
yo
the
podía dar
possibility
leche,
to
yo
keep
dije no,
on at the milk, I
¿cómo así?
said okay. I said
Primero cuando
based
me
this
dijo yo no
upon
tengo
in
ningún
this
tipo
process, I
edad
emotionally
para
was not
tomar una pastilla
prepared
de
to
lactancia
take
femenina
a pill and do
sin
as if
embargo,
nothing
pues
had
eso
happened.
no,
But
no
back
me hizo
then they
iniciar a
didn't even give
consumir
me the possibility,
clorcastros o
and I don't
productos
know what it was that aligned
para
to so
ovulación
that
artificial.
I would ever
Pero esa digamos que
decide.
fue
But
por
the
mi
truth in
esposa,
that in this
pues me
case
dijo
of
que
prenatal
no,
grief,
nosotros
I
en
do
nuestra
feel that in
familia
Colombia
estamos
and Latin America,
trabajando en eso,
we are working on this,
investigando
and
para
that
decir
the
sobre
mother
nuestro propio
can
cuerpo,
decide
pero
on their
yo
own
sé que
body
existía
in their
adopción,
process, and that
no
it's an
como
option.
sería
It's not
como lo
just
hubiéramos visto, sino como un
it's
adoptado,
an option. It's an option
donde
that
puede
one
dar
can
libremente su bebé a lactancia.
that the baby
Nadie me dijo
dies.
que
And
yo iba a
nobody
quedar
was told
embarazada.
me that I was
Uno
going
cambia
to
entre
keep
eso,
on
pero la gente también está
lactating.
como
This
preocupada
is
por
something
muchas
that people
cosas
are worried about,
y
many
no
other
saben que
things,
el
and that they
proceso
don't know that the
físico
physiological
como de
process
forma física,
of a mother
cuando se tiene
continues,
parto,
that one
cuando se
keeps in
tiene una bebé
postpartum, that one
y
keeps
todos digamos
and
esos
therefore
síntomas que
that we have all
digamos
the symptoms,
que
and
tiene
you
una
keep all
mamá
the symptoms that a mother
cuando
has,
tiene en los
and
brazos
that
como uno
and
cuando
as
tiene en
one
sus
that
manos.
doesn't have it.
Entonces para mí
And
fue una
that's why
opción,
for me
pero
it was never an
obviamente
option,
pues
but
como muy
also I
gracias
would
a
would
los
like to
médicos,
welcome
a todo el
the
personal
doctors and
sanitario,
everybody,
a
all the
que
healthcare
existe esa
professionals, so
opción
that they
de
also give
teleconsultación
an
o de
options, and that they can
reconocimiento
give us
psicosocial, como
safety,
quiera que
knowing that,
llamen,
as Angela will
pues en
said,
realidad es de
that
manera
the
legal,
truth
no
is
puede
that
ser.
this
Y realmente
topic
que pasa
legally
totalmente
has been
como un
opening
hecho
up,
que más que
and
la
that
posibilidad
more
es
than a
un hecho.
possibility,
Entonces
it's a
pues muchas
fact,
personas
and
como
that
yo
many people like
hicimos
me
cita
and many, and therefore it's a very important for that remaining process because that's perinatal grief,
si quiere podemos seguir con la
and that
demostración.
we can continue.
Como les conté, yo hice una
And as I
convocatoria
did
para
this
que las
graph
personas que
for
no
the
son
people that
muy ilustradas
are
acerca
not,
de la
don't
donación
know
de
this
suero,
topic about
mi
the
paso
donation
fue el
of breast
contacto
milk.
con el hospitalario
First,
de
it was the
Leche
contact
y se
with the
presentó
hospital
como
and the
para
milk
ver si era
bank,
una candidata para la
and
donación,
to
¿verdad?
see if I was a
Algunos
candidate,
nunca lo
and
hicieron,
therefore some can't
igual
do it. And
acompañé,
the
igual
tests
me
went,
apoyé, digamos,
and
y
the,
hoy en casa me
and they
enseñaron a
taught
sacar
me
solo
how to
como
the
de
extraction.
extraer. Es un proceso
And this
supremamente
is a
duro,
very friendly process with the mothers
imagínate
because
que el hospital
we
está
can see
recorrido
that they do
toda la ciudad,
they
entonces
go
son becas
picking up breast
semanalmente,
milk on a daily
ellos
basis,
acuden
and
para pues para
therefore
ser estériles, ellos una
and
vez
therefore there it's a difference because as at the beginning I started in the breast milk with the banks,
pero en el
but
caso de
when we
ellos
talk
ellos
about
nacen
in
con
the breast
seno
milks, they are in glass
para
jars,
conseguir, creo yo que
and therefore
para que no se vuelva tan ácido y para que no se haga
so
pasteurización
that the
muy rápido.
pasteurization,
Entonces,
and
tengo procesos
but we can
alimentarios
see
todo
that
practicado,
the bank
pero
milk
la forma en que
gives
para
you
que no se vuelva
the
tan
chart and
ácido,
also
lo
the
recogen, lo
extractions.
hierven. Entonces, es un proceso que en realidad
But
no es
this
súper
is
sencillo para
that
mamá.
it's not as
Hay
easy
que
as one,
obviamente
and
estar en
therefore that
casa,
one needs
la
to be at home,
movilización
and
requiere
that
pues,
mobility
recursos económicos
requires
y muchas
economic
veces no
resources that
pueden.
maybe some can't
Entonces,
have.
es un proceso que es
And this
muy
is a
fuerte.
very
Muchas personas
and
no lo saben
but
y
so
pues
many
hoy
people
lo
don't
podemos
know,
tener en
and
cuenta
it's
porque
great to
fue
you
el
for you
primer
to take it in
programa
count
que yo
because in
doné
the
y
two
fue el
banks that I
Hospital Universitario
donated
Mayor
that was
para
Hospital
que la gente sepa
Universitario,
fácil.
it was that
Todos los
way,
días los
and
establecimientos los
therefore
hacen en la casa, entonces
they
ellos
do it, they go home, they don't
recogen leche
because
desde que
the
ellos fueron a la
and
casa,
therefore they went home. They didn't
casi.
have to move around,
Entonces, por eso es muy
and
bueno para
that's
mamás
why
porque
this is
de esa
very
forma
important because this is a
no se
system
quedan
that
tan
works.
olvidados. Tal vez nosotros no nos
And
estamos
maybe we're
mentalizando en
not inventing
Colombia,
anything
esto ya
in
es un proceso
Colombia. This
que
is a process
cada profesor,
that
cada
it's
ejecutivo
working, that
universitario está establecido
and that
y
it's
lo
been
sigue.
established,
Porque si
and
las personas
we can
pensamos
see that
o en la,
that the regulation. What I wanted to say, and the minister, it was a setback because of the process, but it was not to anchor in these cases, but everything is moving. But the donation of maternal milk during a prenatal grief, it's very good. We can keep on. And therefore, these are two things that I had in the breast milk bank. And also, I'm sorry about the slides, but the thing is, I don't have a way to manage the deck. I was telling it that I donated my maternal milk for 10 minutes. Maybe that's not much. Maybe for some it can be a lot. But here I want to tell you that breastfeeding was more biological thing. It was just a remaining process of my grief because it was an extension of and become a liquid, or it was a care for me and also for the people or the babies that were needing it. And it also helped me to build a very solid identity as a mother, because there is a very a significant shock in when one loses a baby, when a baby dies, and one physically doesn't see it, but socially I started to have a lot of support by everybody in reaffirming my maternity, the place that I had in my society, and that's helped me a lot. Maybe not to build the identity because but it helped me to build a new identity and to work on the world that Amara left on the world in me. And I had a connection that went beyond the loss. Breastfeeding is a very personal process. Yeah, even if I have a baby alive or not. Therefore, breastfeeding for me was a connection that I kept on having in one way or another with the legacy, with that life and legacy. And I see that for many mothers, it can be a painful process, but maybe it can be like a torture, and it allows me to keep on living It allowed me to be connected to life, and it gives me reasons to live. And because for many years I didn't have a different idea than to breastfeed and to give all the milk, and therefore I had the possibility of visiting the ICU and the babies that were getting my milk, and it was very beautiful to be able to have that link between who is that milk for, to talk with the mothers that were receiving that maternal milk. Then from way or to the other, they had been in the ICU because they were not in, and that's why. And that there was a sense of life. It gave me a reason to live. It gave me a place in the world, and also a place in society, and also a routine and organization, which is very important for what I'm going to tell you later on. And as you can see, many people started to say, "Yeah, I agree. I don't agree." But one of the points, it's more relevant. And therefore we can see after you lose a baby, your mental health gets impacted in all the spheres possible. And therefore I started in the moment I started the therapeutic process as when Amara died, and we talk about the debate of the donation of milk with the minister. And therefore I asked, and therefore to examine and to had a concept, a psychological concept about how had breastfeeding been for me, and how it hadn't affected my mental health, but had favored my organization in the process. Because for me, breastfeeding was that, and therefore maybe tomorrow you're gonna ask many questions about how was the breastfeeding of lactate, maybe maybe the structure was Amara. No, many people ask me these questions because why did it took me such a long time, and what did I feel when there was the extraction of the milk, and if I thought it was Amara. No. And I can feel that the moment Amara dies, I stop linking breastfeeding to her. And in the moment, I always knew that the extraction was going to be for the babies in the ICU, and that milk was for them. That Amara was a bridge, or that's why everything happened. And but basically it didn't affect me in this sense, but I can say this is something very personal. Many mothers, when they use the distraction, maybe they could be maybe they can't be using things in a different way and for different meaning. That's why all the process are very individualized, and giving that individuality in that characterization of each of the process, one should treat them as with compassion and not to generalize the things. We can see that all this topic of the breastfeeding turned the world. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'm so sorry. I think that it has been a very beautiful process. We acknowledge it as well. We want to acknowledge this, and to be able to grant them some space, to the other panelists, and to be able to continue with the debate. And we would like to thank you all the context that Dr. Angela has given, and therefore in you and everything that we are doing, and through this change in policies, and that's why. And I apologize, but I would like to. We have Dr. Joao. Dr. Joao, it's the coordinator and the director of the of the Latin American milk banks, and this is where most of the milk banks in Latin America were tutored, and which we all belong. And I would like to ask you, Dr. Joao, we can see that the human milk banks currently have enough linings to be able to support this grief process. What was the process? What should we do in each of the governments and from this network? And since once do we do it in Brazil? And therefore, and that we as leaders in the as how can you tell us a leader? And therefore, I want to apologize because this is Portuñol because I don't speak Spanish. I'm going to try to do an effort to so that this blend and therefore uh,
Thank you so much for the invitation, the opportunity to be here in this very important moment to listen to these presentations, statements. There's a very important word in Portuguese that doesn't exist in Spanish. It's called saudade. And in fact, I do believe it's the word that approaches to Spanish or similar to Spanish would be the one longing, belonging. I heard you, and I would like to take advantage to invite my colleague. I would like to thank also and to say that before speaking about the topic, I'm going back to my past. The Federico Bank in Colombia was mentioned. Right now, we are with the Secretary of Health of Denmark and with some hospitals in Fusagasugá and Catativa. And we participate in our first Congress of human milk. Banks dedicated to discuss and to revisit our journey of mobilization of 15 years with the participation of 5 continents around the day we celebrated yesterday, which is the day of donation of breast milk. So I was able to be in Cartagena, Cali. We had a very important exchange together with Colombia. Worked closely and we've seen the possibility of engaging with other countries. I thought in doing a presentation today, but you already shared many of the things I was going to say. I do believe that it's timely to be able to change my own perspective. What I planned at the beginning just to talk about this topic in a different way. The first important thing that we must say is what is a milk bank? A milk bank in our network is a network born in Brazil, Latin American network of Iberoamerica and the Caribbean. So we do believe that the milk banks are very important. I was very sad when I heard at the beginning what was presented. A different proposal in Latin America and that we don't have much more. So in Colombia, I don't know the reason. The Ministry of Health in Colombia, they see breast milk as a human tissue, not as a nutrition product. This is the freedom of each country, but I'm saddened by that. In fact, we are working with our bank here and in Ibagué. In each milk bank in Colombia, we had an installed capacity of multi-professional teams. We have doctors, licensed nurse, licensed nutritionist. We had professionals that would interact with the rest of the team, psychologists. So this universe enabled us to work with a perspective understanding the different aspects of our human milk banks. For us, it's very important breastfeeding to be able to generate conditions that enable women are the most important characters of this story and are the babies who are going to benefit from that milk. And the mothers are the most important characters. Women that get pregnant and have their babies and decide not to breastfeed. Why is this happening? Breastfeeding, from our perspective, is an act dependent directly on a cultural aspect. So this follows many ideologies, and this is an instinctive act, biological act, which is the right of every mammals in the world. As humans in the world we live, it's a gift. No mammal No mammals have changed the rules of nature when we talk about breastfeeding. That's the physiology. This is led by the market laws and it's impacted apart from its biology. So there's a very important things that we need to understand. Breastfeeding is a hybrid category. Hybrid category that mixes all the biologies, physiologies with all the social aspects. Breastfeeding not only depends of a two breasts, depends of a lot of things. Breastfeeding does not only depend of the prolactin, doesn't depend only of cytokines. Breastfeeding depends of the physical and psychological aspects of all women. And it has to do with all her biology. We need to understand all the perspectives, the relationship, a hormone relationship, as already mentioned, what's happening at a cellular level in terms of orthomolecular processes. So here, a stress, for example, can lead to distress and really affect breastfeeding. So mixing biology of the society measured by all these aspects, that's why we need to be ready to protect all the women, offered conditions so that a free and a clear and informed can really decide to breastfeed. Considering all these things, this is our network in Brazil. And what we share with Latin America, and that we share with all of many countries, that meaning maternity is not weakness, it's strength. As professionals understand this perspective of breastfeeding for the good being, for well-being of the babies, there's a series of things that I'm not going to enter into detail because we don't have enough time. Just to understand how the context has changed. But there's something very important, which is to feel grief in the face of death. We can treat this in different ways. We can approach this in different ways when we share our experiences. When we share our experiences in Europe, and we discuss the invasion of Ukraine and Poland, countries that had their healthcare services destroyed. So we start different situation, and we understood something that is presented in the network, but it's not as visible yet, which exists. The fear, the fear of a human being is faced with death. But in the category of human beings, there is another special category, which is the category called woman mother. This category, woman mother, has a huge fear of her own death, which would be the death of her baby. In this context is where we need to understand. I'm talking about the reality of Colombia. I talk about my reality and also our network outside. And also, I want to talk on behalf of Brazil. For us, never, never did we have any difficulty in a legal aspect. Nobody said no. Nobody said that the mother cannot donate. But the story is not as beautiful as it's been told. We have the challenge, always, the challenge to generate opportunities to learn with our mistakes. Our network is huge. We have 38 centers of human milk. We have 300 areas of milk collection, more than 600 operational units in Brazil. But this is very important. Still, this healthcare service is submitted to a regulatory system. This regulatory system that is really overseen by the local authorities. From the Ministry of Health, we are really very important in the sector. It's something that is very interesting is that we need to discuss right now. It's regulations, legal aspects, and an aspect that for us is very important up to date. The difference established among the role of the laws, the role of the determinations, and the role of the determinations that stay on paper. So the responsibility that we have inside our healthcare system, I also need to propose not only what has to be worked upon and discussed, but I also have the obligation to generate the due conditions so that these determinations that are on paper don't stay on paper, but also to be a reality. And something very important that is important to say in this context. No problem can be much. The most important thing is life. No problem is bigger than life. Our capacity to analyze in a comprehensive manner, our opportunity to use the tools offered by different methodologies of the qualitative explanation methodology in Schul's methodology in many aspects, the representation, theory of representations of, let's say, it's not important what's the social reference. It's important that the qualitative studies can enable us to understand the dimension in its own depth. Even though the statistics doesn't enable us to do so, to expand our capacity to read and understand what's happening. And then there we see the academia have the responsibility to understand that we are for a long time in a different world that we lived in the past, where the science, where the knowledge, the value, knowledge, the new knowledge, the new knowledge is much more important. The knowledge that can be able to really make a social transformation. Because due to this perception, we can change the position of our authorities, healthcare authorities that are responsible to monitor or to enable the activities of the milk banks in Brazil. Otherwise, we will have a huge problem. We need to be ready, always to be ready based on social psychology, based on many other principles in everything that the theory teaches us. And the authorities understood in a different manner. Thank you very much, Doctor. Just to wrap up, a professor that lost her son and is ongoing a very beautiful process, changing the positions of the official organizations. Really, she's working so that the mothers can really donate their milks. Thank you so much, Doctor. Your perspective is very important, very, very important. Thank you very much. And something that is on paper and something must be a reality. And what is our responsibility to support these mothers that want to donate and all the process of the maternity? And there's also very important, there's no suffering in different surroundings. So thank you very much for your perspective that you have in Brazil with the milk banks and everything that has to do with donation. Thank you very much, Dr. João. I would like to ask you, now we have Dr. Eglinton here, in the experience that the United Kingdom has in Newcastle with the program that you have in place, the butterfly program. What ethical considerations or how this process has been in donation? Did it start with the neonatologists, or were the families who started, who asked that? How was the process to be able to have these donations in a mother that is grieving?
Thank you. I don't know if there's any translation, so I'll have to speak in English. But this process started with the mothers. It wasn't our idea.
No fue nuestra idea.
Mothers came to us
Las
and
madres
said,
nos contactaron y
"I
nos
want to
dijeron,
donate my
yo
milk."
quiero donar mi leche.
So this has been a
Entonces,
program that's
este ha
getting
sido
bigger,
un programa que está creciendo,
but primarily
pero
it was started by
principalmente
women
comenzó
themselves.
con las mujeres mismas.
And our job now
Y nuestro
is to
trabajo
try and
ahora
create
es
learning resources for
tener
doctors
todos
and
los
nurses,
recursos, conductores,
but
enfermeras,
also to work
pero
with
también poder trabajar
mothers
con las
to
madres,
hear their voice.
escuchar
So we're
sus
creating
voces.
more videos that
Y
people
estamos
can
creando más
understand.
videos para que las personas puedan entender el proceso.
There is a big challenge
Tenemos un gran
because some
desafío
doctors
porque
and some
algunos
nurses
doctores, algunas
don't
enfermeras
think this is a good
no
idea.
piensan que es una buena idea.
Very paternalistic.
Es un poco paternalista, que las mujeres no deberían estar haciendo
So
esto.
we have a big job in
Entonces
education.
tenemos un gran trabajo por delante
But
en
we have a lot of women
educación,
who
pero
want
tenemos
to
muchas
make this
mujeres
work, and
que quieren
so
que esto funcione.
collecting data, and we can
Estamos
share this with
recolectando
you,
datos y podemos
in the
compartirlo
future.
con ustedes en el futuro.
Thank you.
Muchas gracias. Thank you very much, doctor. Very well. Thank you very much, doctor. We would like to ask Doctora Natalia, psychologist. I would like to ask you, how to balance respect to authorities and institutions to protect the mental health of the mothers, of that mother. How do you believe that the institutions should see the mother so that her mental health is not vulnerated? Wonderful, your question, because it enables us to integrate everything that we have already mentioned. What Valentina mentioned, Amara's mother saying, to be able to donate her milk enabled her to build bridges towards what we call to healing that pain that inhabited her heart. And to build those bridges is not only in the psychotherapeutic arena, but we go into the macro and said, okay, to build bridges enables us to reduce inequality gaps in healthcare, mental health care. So this links to what Professor João said from Brazil. Brazil is a reference point for the milk banks. It's also a reference point for us as well. So he talked about maternal psyche, because this is going to we interpret the maternity, or it's like an expected crisis, because as he mentioned, that she is already a woman, mother, goes through a transitional process that is not only psychological, but it's also biological, because her brain is transforming, anatomically is transforming through the estradioles. It changes the amount of gray matter compared to the white matter in some specific regions that are going to prepare her to take care of that baby she's expecting. So it reduces the gray matter in hippocampus, prefrontal cortex, that it can help us with that power to be connected with the baby. And in parallel, around the 16th week and 22 week, the lactogenesis starts. So thanks to these estrogens and progesterones, all these things mature. When there is a perinatal death, there's some biological processes that are happening in parallel. There's a brain that is transforming anatomically, but at the same time function in a functional manner to be able to connect that baby. It's reorganizing what she has thought about the relationship while her breasts are being prepared to breastfeed. So there's a brain that is ready to take care of that being that is expected to survive. So that is linked to what Angela Maria Munoz was mentioned about the feeling of biological failure that there is when, after all this body with all the physical, emotional, all the cognitive bodies transformed, we are with empty arms. That's why we feel about this biological failure. So the possibility of donating can enable us to continue building bridges so that there can be a redefinition of loss. These women that during her pregnancy was preparing to be a mother, her identity changed. In this transformation that Professor Joao talked about her psyche, she was prepared for that. So if we give her the option based on a law that gives us the option to inform that the women that is still being an agent of herself, even though she's going under a trauma, she can choose what is best for her, according her belief system, according also her history in mental health, also the representations that she has regarding maternity. So my answer to you is, what can we do? We need to have everything in mind and to have it connected, woven, and to review how do we, what are the lenses that we're using, our points of view, because the way we see the others, the way we see the people, the way we see a baby that has recently died, how we see a mother who is grieving, she is in a state of shock. The way we see her, how we interpret that mother is going to define our behavior with that mother in grief. So first and foremost, as part of the healthcare teams and also the economy community that takes care, what are the beliefs that we have among the mothers in grief? What are the beliefs that we have on breastfeeding in a grieving process? And this leads us also to the beginning. You were talking about ethics, ethical implications. We need to be ethical in acknowledging this woman and to inform that woman in a timely manner so she can make these informed decisions that must be based on information that is updated, coherent information with the policies, also the institutional policies, because we know the public policies are going to be applied in a scaling process. Regarding the implementation of institution, we need to make decisions, and they need to make decisions. And also we need to take care of the professionals. The institutions must need to take care of professionals, because we're not aware that the professionals that are there for the baby to survive, they're also grieving. So when we understand the grieving professionals, when we understand that they also get tired, that they really are suffering, we can do micro changes in the way we accompany women and their families. And important to remember, we talked about resolution of 2024, and the resolution mentions responsibility of the milk bank. These are the steps that Valentina said. To receive the milk guarantee, it has a cold chain, that it's not all the tests that must be done to this milk. Nevertheless, they do not have the burden to take care of mental health. They must be informed to do a revision, because according to this resolution, there are COOPs. The COOPs is what enables us to really receive the income. But we have COOPs to refer the women under grieving that are grieving for healthcare assessment with interdisciplinary team. As Joao mentioned, psychotherapy through psychology appointments, also psychotherapy, family psychotherapy, and group psychotherapy. And psychologists, we know that according to certain scales that we apply, according to certain clinical criteria, we do this referral with perinatal psychiatry.
And I would like with Dr. Lydia, we have the Latin American context. Are social and cultural or religious barriers that make it hard to talk about milk donation within the context of perinatal and neonatal grief. I'm going to talk on behalf of my country because, yes, I believe too. I think there are many barriers that are not cultural barriers, social or religious barriers, but those are the prejudices that have nothing to do with culture. And there it's the lack of knowledge, the lack of setting into context the evidence, and also the lack of putting into context the rights of people. That's why, yes, there are many barriers that could be easier to overcome if they were associated with a different kind of evidence. It's very difficult to think of the barriers when we talk about prejudices, because when there is prejudice, it's very hard to convince the people of something else. And the most unfortunate thing is when prejudice is installed. It's part of public policy. And whoever needs to follow the pathways so that we can make the comply and enforce all people's rights. And this is something in my country, and we talked about this with some students and some residents from different careers that are health associated. Yes, there is a lack. There is a development of prenatal psychology, but public policy has not enabled that there is prenatal psychology in the current health institutions, especially public institutions. And this is why I'm going to disseminate this to allow that mothers talk about their grief, talk about their issues, talk about their process, and talk about their desires of how they feel that they can better process this grief. It's not enabled, and not yes or not. It's that I'm not no. It's they don't do it with a professional perinatal health. And evidently this is the thing. It's that it's each of us need to do this. Therefore, thank you so much. Angela, and I would like to ask you about what has led us to this debate. What has led us to this debate as a health professional that works in a kangaroo program, where obviously there's been deaths because, for example, we talk about prenatal and neonatal grief or mourning, but as we are saying, we are in a moment where life and death are very close at the moment of birth. But we therefore we do, but we also kids can die. There have been opportunities to be able to accompany this to, and therefore, what led you as a health professional to talk about prenatal death? And there were a lot of motivations, but I want to continue Natalia, as she wanted to add. Following what Natalia was saying, I was thinking, what is my role as Dr. Lydia told me, what is my role as a pediatrician in a kangaroo program in this situation, And therefore, once parents take their babies home, they think that they have overcome a very challenging stage, and therefore we can say that we in the kangaroo programs and in the follow-up programs, we need to have this point that has the capacity of guiding the mothers. And when we start to see barriers, as Angela was telling us, and 4 years ago in Chile, and in a discussion like this one, I was telling the doctor that back in then it was prohibited to donate the milk of mothers in perinatal mourning, and many of the attendees were surprised, and in other scenarios, people were surprised because they say next time that we get together, we are going to be working on several situations so that the situation changes. And it's very important where we can now see that we're about to change that legislation. When we came back from that meeting, there were wonderful people as Angela working and in this situation, and that's why and we are a civil society. We have that capacity to be able to transform realities, and therefore we need to participate. That we need to participate in public policies. That's why there was in the media we were closing up. And therefore, we have this risk. There is this law that once again they were stopping on that donation of the milk of the breast milk of these mothers, and that's why from the academia we decided to raise our hand and say, hey, we want to contribute, and we want to contribute in Absolneo, open up an academic space where we can have all these the perspectives from an interdisciplinary approach, and also from the civil society that are committed to transforming the situation. A lot of people in the Kangaroos program that work in the follow-up that we need to prepare, and therefore we need to modify this benefit or participate in the generation of new public policies. I don't know if and therefore I don't know if any of the panelists want to do, and then we go back to the questions from the audience. Therefore, we can say that Valentina, the mother of Amara, it's a representation. It represents the real network that sustains the policies. As Dr. Embleton, we said, we can see, and therefore everything came up from the desire of a mother, an informed mother, an aware mother, and especially a well-accompanied mother. And therefore that I do hope that the thing is that we are all working with different perspectives, and with all we are working from our perspective, but we are participating in a dialogue. I wanted to talk about some of the arguments which were the basis of the minister, and one of them was the emotional impact. And along with what Natalia said, is we need to stop considering perinatal grief as a pathology. It's not a mental health disorder until it gets complex, according to the DSM-5. But going into practical elements, each woman is different, and each case is different. And we can say that just because a woman is facing the loss of a child with all the psychological impact that it may have, the woman is sick and cannot make her decisions. That's one thing. And the other thing, I want to make emphasis on the relevance of being trained, because when we are trained, not only do we cover certain learnings, we also have an internal transformation that changes starts in us. It's not easy because in the academia, when we study undergraduate courses, they taught us different things. They said that they should add and therefore change is not easy. But and therefore, this is an idea for us to open up to the training and to be able, and that are in hospital environments and that are educational and academic environment also open up to this transformation, because I want to say this is not something, it's also the neonatologists, the gynecobstetric, and therefore, and we do it. And therefore, sometimes we need to be educated on how to give back news, and therefore how to talk, not from those prejudices, but how to talk without damaging and without and make it hurt even more, and also to reassess the pain that we currently have. And Dr. Perla Duon has a question, and I apologize because good afternoon, and congrats for this, right? Thank you so much. I was so happy reading the whole program, but this topic, all of the topics have been excellent, but this is a beautiful topic for me, and I can't tell you why. And one, it's this that we've been seeing this for more than 4,000 years, that a mother loses a baby, and that they breastfeed the baby of another person. They do it because of love, for survival, for one reason or the other. But in my case, this is something very special. We've been talking, because my mother and my aunt had a baby the same day, and when my mother came back with me, and my aunt died. The baby died. The only reason why she kept living and she was able to have three babies more was because she breastfed me. My mother could only do it in the morning and the evening, and my uncle did it for a year and a half. I didn't receive a formula. My aunt breastfed me. Now, thanks, I am seeing that they're turning this into a protocol, not only the donation for the mother, and this is wonderful for me. This is a beautiful topic, and since I was a kid, I thought about this. I lived this. I am breastfed by my aunt, and she was able to get back home, and she decided not to die, but she decided to breastfeed me. This is what the comment that I wanted to say, and how beautiful this panel is. It's a beautiful panel. I wanted to congratulate you, and I hope things happens all over. Thank you so much. Congrats. I wanted to add something. I think that as well as we do the high-risk follow-up, we can say that no family is the same as other, no baby it's like the other, no grief is like the other. And therefore, I think if the academia and the civil society, and we all agree that it's feasible, it's possible, and that we should encourage it, and I think that I think that we need to legislate grief. What you need to legislate is how do we enable that whoever wants to donate the milk can do it. But we cannot legislate on the grief. Your grief is like that. No. This is the way we do it. No. But I think that this is where we have the biggest defect this is the biggest setback that we had in this legislation. Yes, Following the line of Dr. Wong, and we can see that this case included the figure of the caregiver, which was a huge pillar in the development of many kids. And because there were limitations, there were cultural limitations. So, for example, a high status mother could not breastfeed, and they were also worried about their body shape. They couldn't lose their body shape, and that's why this happened. But with modern times, there were a series. With modernity, there were a series of restrictions, limitations, because we lived in a pre-infections, pre-AIDS time, and then we have a post-HIV period, and this changes so many things. And I think that now the same people that suffers are showing us the need of showing us the need that we have inside the people, but of course, because the behavior is also in the DNA. But how can we go back to rescue that ancestral knowledge? And I think this is, and I think that the health team, that the civil society, the legislation, they are in checkmate, because they makes us to look backwards in this time, and we don't like to look back. We like to look forward. But we can see that whoever doesn't know their story cannot have a better future. And therefore, my question to the panelists is, how do you visualize what is the best strategy to include this in felt needs, that it's a concept as a public health concept, but we don't legislate anything that it's not, that it's a felt need. That's the question. How do you legislate if this is not a felt need? Es-
Take the opportunity
Ustedes
to
tomen
work
la
with
oportunidad
everybody
para trabajar
from
con
all of
todos,
the different
de
countries
todos
around Latin
los
America
diferentes países de
and
Latinoamérica,
collect data,
puedan trabajar entre
because you
todos y
need
puedan
data
compilar datos,
to
porque
prove to the
necesitan datos para poder
politicians
demostrarle
why this is
a los
important and why they
políticos
should
por qué
be
esto es
supporting
importante y
the
por qué deben
legislation.
estar
People
apoyando
want to see
la
the studies, they
legislación,
want
que la
data.
gente quiere ver los
And
datos, quieren
Alcepnio
ver,
could
y
coordinate a
Absentio
lovely
puede
study
coordinar un estudio
across all of Latin
maravilloso en toda
America,
Latinoamérica,
where you collect data
donde
on
ustedes
what is
compilan
happening with
datos acerca de
lactation
lo que está
after baby
sucediendo con
loss.
la
You
lactancia
then
del
can
bebé
use this
perdido. Pueden
data to
utilizar
work with
estos
mothers
datos
like
para poder
Valentina
trabajar
and
con madres como
design a training
Valentina y
program
poder diseñar un
that you
programa
cascade
donde
to all the
ustedes
health
hacen una cascada a
professionals.
todos los
It doesn't need to be a
profesionales de
big
la
training
salud.
program,
No tiene que ser un
but
programa de
you have this
entrenamiento grande,
opportunity
pero
now
tienen
to
esta
make things
oportunidad
happen
para
if you
hacer que
work
las
together.
cosas
So
sucedan.
you need
Si
some
trabajan
data
juntos,
to
necesitan
prove
datos
that this
para
is an
poder
important
demostrar
issue.
que
You
esto
need
es
to
un tema
prove that
importante.
women
Necesitan
are
demostrar
not being
que
given a
las mujeres
choice,
no se les
that they
está
want
dando
a
elección
choice,
y que ellos
and
quieren
then you need
tener
data to
elección, y
prove
necesitan
that
datos
women
para
like
poder
Valentina
comprobar
and
que
many
mujeres como
others
Valentina
find this a
y como
positive
muchas otras
part of
encuentran
grief
una
and not some
parte
negative
positiva del duelo
mental health
y
problem,
no es un
because I think
problema
a
de
lot
salud
of people
mental negativo,
imagine
porque muchas personas
this must make
consideran
the grief
que esto
worse.
debe
But
empeorar el
everyone
duelo,
who speaks to
pero
me
todo el
says
que habla
this made me
conmigo me
feel
dice,
better.
esto me hizo sentir
So I
mejor.
think you need to
Por
collect
tanto, yo
that
pienso que
data
necesitan
in a
compilar
Latin
esos
American
datos
setting
en un
and
contexto
prove to your
latinoamericano y poder
politicians that this
demostrarle a
should
sus
be a
políticos
universal
que esto
program.
debería ser un programa universal.
Y lo que dice el doctor
And what
Embleton,
Dr. Embleton says, it's it's a need for us to be able to start to generate our own data and to be able to start to generate our own theory with a qualitative basis. What are the representations that's a need? That's a need for us. And now going up about the needs of the family. That's why we need to prepare and how to our communications, how to give news, how to develop the counseling skills or the assertive communication and effective communication skills. But above all, we need to help to wake up in the health teams the desire of connecting with this topic, and also the desire to connect with that mother, with that baby that passed, and with that family. Like to listen to the opinion of Dr. Adriggio, if he's listening to us well, about how, how from the banks we can manage this that is proposed by Dr. Embleton. How can we manage the data collection about it, such as a sensitive issue, so that we can show data that show is very impactful data, and even harder, even harder data than the heads of our politicians in Latam. Thank you so much for this opportunity. The truth is, I think that for us, when we should work with the perspective of joining different efforts. Our network is a well-structured network, and we could be together in trying to building up an assessment protocol, an acknowledgement protocol that would allow us that it's not complicated, but in our structure, for example, in Brazil, it should be implemented with relative ease. And I think that right now, in this moment, I don't have how to propose something, but I do think that we should say that we are willing to open up and talk about this topic in case that you want to be able to blend our associations with our breast and milk banks, and we can get together and to open up on a workshop in to be a to offer a workshop to call more people that allows us to think about this topic. And I would love to be able to do this, and maybe it can be a feasible project. Thank you so much, Joao. The people that know me says that I just got you a job. I just got you a job, Joao. You're right. Sure, sure. We will work together, Joao. Yes, we're open. It's going to be our pleasure. Okay, regarding the question about how to legislate the felt needs, thank you so much, because to legislate without taking into account those needs generates empty regulations. And I believe that the main thing is to understand that grief is a public health issue, and that I think that in Colombia we already opened up a space for prenatal death or prenatal grief, and I think that we needed to listen to have those felt needs. That's why the relevance of the participation process. We need acknowledgement, giving the invisibilization and the invalidation. We are the only foundation in Colombia that talks about this topic, and one of the requests of the families is we need to be validated, and that our link with that baby, it's validated, that our pain has a place, and that accompanying process as well. The time, it's a felt need. Don't leave me 5 minutes with the body of my baby. I need skin to skin, because this is no longer for the baby, it's for me. I cannot say hi and without being able to have my baby in my arms, and I cannot say goodbye without having said hi before. felt a need as a time for license. I want to tell you that in Foundation we're working in a law to be able to create a special prenatal grief license, because we're talking about the mental health for men and the family, and we don't give them a space. They need a work license, and the idea is to open up this space. The document that was submitted to the health ministry had the signature of 78 women that were in prenatal grief, but as well as different health groups. That's why I think that we need to listen to them, because if we hadn't drafted that document and hadn't generated that pressure, that resolution would be developed with us directly involved are there. That's why we need to strengthen the groups, the associations, and I wanted to celebrate that Asabneo is open up a space like this one, so because we're not going to be able to do things on our own. And I also believe that the creation of pathways is relevant. And in the moment when there's so much pressure, when we need to answer, because the health institutions, we need some very clear pathways based on communications, based on validation, based on the relationship with that baby, the management of the body, for example, the memories, the goodbye, the autopsy, each of those moments of that continuum needs a pathway, but it's not an empty pathway. It's ones that we as a team have integrated. That's why the butterfly code. That's why the prenatal rooms for goodbyes, and has to answer to those needs. I wanted to share you to be able to close on this section, so we can say the families that get to the foundation say, the loss of my baby, it's painful, but also the way that I was taken care of in the healthcare institution. This is a memory that I can't forget. And I think that we have a huge opportunity. I'm not going to call it responsibility. This is an opportunity. We believe and we wanted to create memorable experience. Let's integrate death as part of life, and let's give them the same level of dignity to the goodbye that we give to the birth and to the welcome. Thank you. And okay, today we talked about a lot the participation of the father in the CNIU. What happened? What happened to Valentina's couple? What was the accompanying of Valentina's couple? And is this including the psychological support for the father? What happened to? I broke up with Omara's father during the onset of pregnancy. That's why there was no communication. Not even during pregnancy. There was no contact. There was no contact with the father. The grief was just for me as a mother and for my family, because the father was not there. They broke up. Legally in Colombia, the open, the empty arms talk about the care of the mother and the family. It understands the father, that non-pregnant partner, and the person that it's accompanying the mother during the process. We don't talk about the men. It's not just the man. Sometimes who's accompanying the process, it's a grandmother, but it's someone that is having an impact, and it's also a liaison between healthcare and the mother, and she's also facing a grief process and needs accompanying. And also in the resolution 2623, we talk about the emotional process for the men. Man also has the right to be accompanied during the grief and the COVs that allows for the invoicing of this process. We also have family psychotherapy. We have couple psychotherapy, and psychotherapy for a grieving couple, understanding, and it's not just the woman, it's a microsystem, but also all the systems that are surrounding and that include that woman. And this is an anecdote. Many of the psychologists that are here have welcomed the grieving families. They're usually come in as a couple. And I have observes that they're not that resistant. they are not that resistant, and most of them, they initiate as a couple, and they themselves start to decide, okay, let's then first let her go, and then I go on my own, to start to integrate all this transition to paternity process that I had to review my baby. And that's why this is also happening in a very organic manner. And this is my, from my experience in the, as a private, and good evening, everybody. Wonderful, wonderful panel, and as above all, an excellent panel of human webs. I get goosebumps. I've tried not to cry many times when listening into your stories that changes lives. I think that transforming pain in love, it's something that is crucial, and that all the healthcare staff needs to be empowered from that layer that many times we lose during our path and during our professionalism. But I have always said that one can be a very good professional, but above all, you need to be a great human being. And my question is the following. I do know that there were a lot of barriers to be able to get to where you are, but if you could name one or two, and what were the barriers? What were the barriers that you had during the implementation and the accompanying and the donation of maternal milk in the grieving mothers? What are the barriers that you said, oh, that was that one that had a greater impact, and the one that the hardest, the most challenging one, and here we're saying we made it?
Gracias por esa pregunta, porque también lo elaboro, hago un proceso de elaboración. Barreras muchas, no es fácil incidir y transformar, pero creo que la principal es esa a la que les hacía referencia, de la mirada patologizante de la mujer en duelo, ¿sí? Y es que patologizante y paternalista, ¿sí? Es que le va a hacer daño, es que su duelo se va a cronificar, es que ella no puede decidir. ¿Cómo vamos a motivarla o a informarle que tiene esa posibilidad? Pobrecita, ¿sí? Creo que esa es la primera barrera. Cuando yo comprendo, como lo decía la doctora, que no puedo legislar el duelo a rajatabla, sino que cada caso es distinto, y por eso la valoración integral, tanto en salud física como mental, me da a mí una ruta, me da a mí un camino. Cuando yo comprendo eso, me abro a ver cada mujer en su individualidad, desde la humanización, atención centrada en el otro. Esa fue la primera barrera que con el ministerio tuvimos nosotros que en la argumentación, digamos, y la evidencia tuvimos que derribar, ¿no? Y fue muy lindo porque el testimonio de Valentina fue fundamental, ¿no? Ustedes vieron, hay un concepto psicológico, ¿sí? No es subjetivo, tenemos evidencia. Y creo que la segunda barrera aquí muy importante, pues es un tema financiero. ¿A qué hago referencia? Las políticas públicas y las decisiones en materia de salud generan impactos y efectos desde, pues, el fisco, ¿sí? Y ese fue uno de los argumentos del ministerio. Pero que hay algo que también es muy interesante, y es que las rutas de atención materno-perinatal y el presupuesto general de la Nación pues tienen que incluir los rubros necesarios para dar cumplimiento a la legislación vigente. Fin. Máxime cuando esa legislación está orientada al cumplimiento de los
When
objetivos de
that
desarrollo.
is fulfilling the Sustainable Development Goals, the healthcare is very important, prevention of mortality, perinatal and neonatal mortality. So that barrier, we can see it's neutralized when we have support and knowledge of the system. That is what only work from the foundation. We partner with healthcare groups because this is a joint knowledge of the whole society. And third is it's more like the understanding of grief as a joint responsibility. We must all be able to participate, contribute, And I would like to close by saying we're always going to find barriers, but this cannot be an obstacle so that we can decide and insist and do advocacy and persist, because really this Congress is a result of that. The law of empty arms is a result of that, and humanizations must be real. This is our responsibility. Thank you very much. Thank you, Angela. Good afternoon. I would like to thank you for this very important topic. It's very close to my heart. I'm a mother of a twin, a survival preterm twin. The other one died, and I donated my milk for 2 years. I'm passionate about this topic. I think it's wonderful that you bring this topic to the table. It's wonderful what you have already said. This is an articulated work, and we need changes and transformation. If we need that, we need to work from the different actors of the society, this including the families, the voice of the families, organizations that are really raising those needs, because maybe the professionals in healthcare don't see the needs. Maybe the politicians don't see the needs. And we come from a culture in Latin America which is based on hierarchy. And I also mentioned that, Dr. Lydia, I'm a mother, and the healthcare professionals see me as a simple mom. If I say I have a need on the well-being of the family or the baby, they see me as a mom, and the same thing happens with politicians. And so there's need for public policies. So this, they said to us, this is public expenditure. Who's going to finance this? Where do we have the resources? But in healthcare, I think the World Health Organization has this very well defined. Healthcare, mental health care is under the healthcare system. And if we want to legislate or if we want to be pro-health, we need to grant resources to health, to the mental health. I come from Costa Rica, where mental health is not a priority. In neonatology and perinatology, we are completely abandoned by the state. So if it's a norm, the mothers grieving can donate. They arrive to the bank to be certified, and they are rejected, and they don't explain why, because the norm really is accepted. But in practice, it's not possible. I was able to donate because I had the survival baby, but this doesn't mean that if I didn't have a survival twin, I could have been a donator if I could donate milk. So my invitation is to replicate these types of spaces, multiply these spaces. Let's raise our voice in Latin America. I would love to see this auditorium full. We need to sensibilize all the participants here today in the Congress, and I congratulate this Alcepneo to work in an articulated manner, seeking a very important transformation. Thank you very much. Dr. Joao? I would like to
a
thank
vosotros por la oportunidad.
you for the
Y la verdad,
opportunity.
a medida que escuchaba,
While I was listening to
en esta
you,
tremenda oportunidad de pensar en la
led me to
posibilidad
think
de
about the
tratar este tema como
possibility
nosotros
to
tratamos
treat
el
this
tema de
topic
lactancia materna con mis hijos.
like inclusive
Recuerden que
breastfeeding.
cuando se pregunta de las
When we
barreras,
ask
la principal
about
barrera
barriers, the
entre
main
los
one
hijos de trabajar y
is
liderar con la inclusión.
to deal with inclusion. I think that's the main barrier. Inclusion. We don't have that.
Esto es visible.
This is so visible. This is
Tenemos
tangible. We
que
need
dar una oportunidad a
to
la
give the
gente
opportunity to
con
learn
quien vive
with
esta
those
realidad.
who live these
¿Qué
realities.
podemos traer de Costa
I
Rica?
listened to my colleague of Costa
Costa
Rica.
Rica
Costa Rica
tenemos uno de los
has one of the
sistemas de lactancia
most
materna, por ejemplo, más probando de leche que trabajamos
strong
en Costa
system.
Rica.
Our model is
¿Y cómo
based on
eso?
Costa Rica.
Y no es
These
simplemente se ve,
things
porque
happen.
eso no es
So
multidisciplinar.
it's a question of visibility. I think that we must treat in the morning when we have another day of Congress. I would like to ask permission to close the possibility of having in our network of human milk.
tenemos profesionales
We have professionals, I
de
said,
Dinamarca,
and also from the
del
Department
Instituto de
of
Salud
Cundinamarca in
donde ellos
Colombia.
también
And
consideran
we can see a
crear un programa de
possibility
protección relacionado a la lactancia materna
to see
inclusiva,
this topic as an inclusive
a
breastfeeding.
través
I
de la
think
evaluación del duelo,
the
cómo
grieving mother is
erradicar
like
ese
a
sentimiento.
strategy of inclusion.
Y
This is my point of view.
que puede ser un punto de
It can be
cambio
an inflection point,
muy grave, como decimos nosotros
as
aquí en
we
nuestro
say
país.
in Portuguese. Inflection point. Thank you very much, doctor. Okay. I would like to thank you who stayed until the end after a very, very long day. Talking about the barriers, when I started to work with this topic, was to overcome apathy, the apathy for our colleagues in the healthcare area. That this topic, it's not with me. That's the barrier. It's the responsibles are from the milk bank to those responsible, but it's not my responsibility. I think that it's very important because it touches us all in different ways. Let's seek how can we contribute. I'm not sure if we're going to be able to obtain this, but if many people are raising our voices and saying this topic is important, from my own space point of view, we were able to see a very important change. My commitment with ASEPNEO is to continue working in this topic, from Red Sanar, Fundación Canguro al CENEP. So, to grant opportunities to continue placing these topics on the table and to be able to advance in Latin America, to have a new legislation, unification regarding donation of breast milk. So I would like to thank you very much for participating today. Thank you. Thank you very much, Angela. Hand of applause to Juan Isaac Yamara for being those beautiful children of these wonderful women that had brought them to us. Thank you very much.